Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Vrakas Blum Computer Consulting May webinar. Today's topic is Sage Basics. We're going to cover many tips, tricks, and functions in Sage that many of us don't know about or have forgotten about over time. Our speaker today is Jessie Braun. Most of you have worked with Jessie at one time or another, and she is one test away from being JavaOps certified. Let's see, very quickly here, our June webinar will be on Sage CRM, so watch for that. Also, since there's a lot of content in today's presentation, we're going to ask you to hold your questions until the end of the webinar. Please use the question function at the bottom of your screen to ask your questions at that time. The webinar is being recorded, so watch for it to be posted to our website. With that being said, on with the webinar. Jessie?
Great. Thanks, Steve. I'm just going to show my screen here. And
good.
Looks good. Okay, good. So as he said, I'm Jessie Braun. I'm a consultant here at Vrakas for the last year. I was previously an end user of Sage, so I know how important it is to find shortcuts and easy ways to navigate your system. So today we're going to be reviewing some tips and tricks to help you work faster, reviewing some frequently asked questions about the modules and about item use, and find ways to track what changes have been happening in your system. So let's start by taking a look at all the different buttons in Sage and what they do for you. I'm going to go ahead and open up Customer Maintenance here. And this is a button that all of you should be familiar with. It's your magnifying glass. The magnifying glass is the main lookup. So we can click there, it gives us all of our customers. What you might not know is that you can use the F2 button the same as the lookup magnifying glass. It takes you to this lookup list here. This can be really useful if you want to narrow down your criteria before doing the search. So for example, I might want to look at only my 01 customers, my 01 division customers. So I type 01 and press F2, it's going to give me the distinct list of 01 division customers. The next button is your next customer number, your new button. You've probably seen this on sales order and purchase order, but I just wanted to point it out here. If we click the new button on our customer, it's going to ask us to define a division, and then once we do, you can see it's given us a customer number. Now, in this instance, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to use that because if we look at our customer list, we can see they're using alphabetical to define their customers. So we don't want to do that for this one, but it is available there. I'm going to go ahead and open up this 01 Breslin, and we're going to look at some of the buttons that are actually in the customer. The first one I want to point out is all of these blue and underlined little names here. So these are all hyperlinks. The blue underline, if you click it, is going to take you to the task that you're looking at. So for in this instance, it is your salesperson maintenance. It's showing me that this salesperson is related to this record, and maybe they've got a commission rate of 10%. So it can be great for searching for information within your system without leaving the screen that you're already on. You can see we also have that for terms code, ship code, tax schedule. You're going to find this throughout your system. I'm going to come over to the History tab now, and we're going to take a look at this screen. So out of the box, you've got sales, cost of sales, profit percent, profit dollars, cash received, and number of invoices. You'll see we have these little two arrows over here, and it's going to allow us to switch our view. So if I click here, you can see that it's changed, and now I have prior year sales, cost of sales, and profit to compare against. Switching it back is just as easy as clicking that button. So you can kind of toggle back and forth real easily and check out your information. Over on the Invoices tab, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger now because it's a lot easier to see this way. We have all of our list of invoices at the top, and So if I highlight one of these invoices, you can see the transactions related to that invoice down here. If we had any kind of payments or credits associated with this invoice, we would see it down below. But maybe we want the ability to take a look at more detail on this invoice or even reprint it. We can take a look at these 3 arrows over here. This is your drill down. And again, you're going to find this throughout the system. So if we click here, it takes us directly to our AR invoice history inquiry, where we can take a look at what's on the lines, or maybe we want to see what's in the addresses. You've got a whole lot more information here, and you can also print an invoice from here from your history. For the next buttons, we're going to switch over to inventory and take a look there. So in our inventory, I'm going to point out a little flashlight button down here related to our vendor. We've got our magnifying glass. You guys are used to that one. The flashlight is going to show you distinct records related to this item. So if we click here, we can see these are the vendors that are associated with this item code. If we click the magnifying glass, you can see it gives us the entire list of vendors. So the flashlight gives you those distinct records. Another great button in here is the calculator button. So it's a calculator button. It doesn't look super exciting, but let's say maybe we want to increase our price, our standard price, by 10%. We can take 84 times 1.1, and it's going to give us this amount. That's great. It's nice to have a calculator in there, but if we hit the return button, it's actually going to return the value into that field for us. So we don't even have to retype it at that point. I've seen this used really frequently with cash receipts entry, that people, want to add up their list of checks when they have their the deposit in the beginning. And so they use the calculator to add that all up and then return the value. Another thing we have here is the memo. So that's this little guy up here, the little notepad. If your notepad is yellow, that means that there are memos associated with it. If it's white, there are no memos. And a memo it's just an attachment to this record. So in this case, it's an item record, and it gives us a little more information. So for example, the fall sales promotion here, it's giving us information about a fall sales promotion. One of the kind of cool features here is we can set an auto display. So you can set it that it will always auto display, meaning anytime anybody uses this item number or pulls it up in item maintenance, that memo is going to pop up for us before we can continue. If you set it by reminder date, it will only go for a certain period of time. And you can see that you enter the reminder start and end date over here. For the next button, we're going to go over to our Transactions tab. You've got a little binoculars over here. That binoculars is sort of a selection criteria window. You'll notice that we only have May transactions here. And if I click the magnifying glass, you can see it's already selected for a range in May. Now, one of the things that Sage does default is it defaults your transactions by item to the current period. So if you're ever looking in your item transactions and you notice you don't have all of the records, come into your binoculars, change this to all, and it's going to show you all of the transactions associated with this that are in your history. You can see we've got a ton more here now. One other thing I just want to point out is that we actually have a drill down here as well. So we can drill down and get your receipt history inquiry. And besides the 3 arrows button, you can also double click to access any of your drill downs. So try double clicking on stuff and see what happens. All right, let's go back to our customer. We're going to spend a lot of time in customer today. And we're going to make this smaller again. So in Sage 100C, you can have an enhanced autocomplete function for your search windows. You've probably noticed that you can search by customer, by the customer's name by typing in the customer number window. So you can see I've typed in gel, it's coming up with Gelco. With Sage 100C, the enhanced autocomplete function you can search by multiple other fields. So to get that started, you would come up to your library master under Utilities and Build Search Index. So just click that button. It's built an index here on my customers, my vendors, and my items. Now, if I type in, let's say I type in MA, it's going to come up with Maverick Papers, which makes sense, but it also comes up with Capri Sailing Ships. And there's no MA in that name, so let's take a look at this record and see what it is. So I can see right away, this is coming from Main Street, MA at the beginning of Main. The customer and vendor record, search by your customer number, your customer name, all of your address fields, your city, state, and zip, the telephone number, the reference field, the comment field, and your sort fields. For items, it searches by item code, item description, extended description, product line, unit of measure, and primary vendor. You can use special characters to narrow down your search results, such as using an asterisk for a wildcard to replace a string of letters. So for example, if I type in J, use asterisk, and CO, it's going to come up with Jelco because it's replacing ELL with that asterisk. You can use question marks for the same purpose, but that is for each character. So if we use question mark, question mark, question mark, CO, it's coming up with Jelco. For some people, this enhanced searching may be more of a hindrance than a help. So you really want to consider this before creating that search index. So maybe it doesn't really make sense for you to be searching by all of the address fields and, you know, it's too much. You just want to search by the customer name. In that case, don't build your search index. Once it's created, the only way to remove it is by deleting a file in your Mass 90 folder. And we don't recommend doing that without the assistance of Vrakas. It can be, it's a little bit scary to go in and start removing files from your Mass 90 folder, so you really want to have an expert to help you to do that. Next, we're going to take a look at customizing our screens and views. So we're going to start by going up here to our user settings. So if I click Change User Settings, you can see we've got a lot of options here that are related only to this user logon. I can have it prompt me for a company code. So if you use multiple companies and when you open it up, you want it to ask you, what company do you want to start in today? You can select that. You can have an implied decimal point using Enter like Tab for a key grid or for the grid. So when you're in sales order entry, you can use the Enter key interchangeably with the Tab key. One of my favorites down here is the default report preview zoom. So you may have noticed in the standard reports that come out of Sage, they come up pretty small. I think it defaults to 100%, and some of those fonts are really, really small. So I like having mine a little bit bigger. I like to set it to 150%. You also have the option of having your classic or your standard desktop. So the standard desktop is what we're looking at right here. Gives you a lot of different options as far as the way that you set up and view it, and we're going to look at those in a minute. But before we do, I'll switch back to classic and show you exactly what that looks like. That's going to be sort of the old style view if you've been around Sage for quite a while. So I'm going to click Accept here, and you notice it didn't change anything. That's because you need to log out one time and log back in before the changes take effect. So you can see here now we're in the classic mode, and we can have our lists of modules by folders and dig down. This is the classic mode. So the only thing with the classic mode is we are not going to have as many options to change the way your screen works as in the standard mode. So I'm going to show you those options by switching back to standard. And again, I've got to close and reopen before the changes take effect. All right. So let's take a look at some of these features that we've got on the Sage Standard. On the View tab, we've got something called Application Scaling. And if I switch from default to medium, you can see that it's actually going to make the font and all of the programs just a little bit bigger. So here's our company maintenance with medium size application scaling. You can see everything is just a lot bigger, maybe a little easier to see. This is a feature that I can see a lot of users, feel that it's very small. The font is very small, and it'd be nice to have it a little bit bigger. So that's kind of a nice feature. You'll notice that I don't have the availability for large and extra large, and that's because this really depends on your screen resolution. My screen resolution only allows for the default and the medium, so those are the only choices available to me. I'm going to change it back to the default because I like it that way. Another option here is your sorting of modules. Now, this is only available in Sage 100C, and if we click this button, you'll notice that it's sorted our modules alphabetically. You can do the same thing with your menus, and that didn't really apply here, but if I come over to my accounts receivable, you can see now it's sorted and it's got Explore up at the top. And you can sort with tasks within the modules, within the menus. So there's all different kinds of sorting options here. So one thing to consider with this, though, is that Sage is designed to list things in a logical order. The modules are listed from the bottom up in the order that they post to each other. So you've got your purchase order and sales order and inventory, goes to accounts payable, accounts receivable, goes to general ledger. It kind of goes, right up the list. You're also going to see this with tasks within the program. So you start with invoice data entry, goes to invoice printing, goes to sales journal, then you have cash receipts journal, and your daily transaction register. So that's just something to keep in mind when you decide whether or not to sort these module lists. You can also change your color and style of Sage. So I've got this nice green background with white, but maybe this is a little too bright for you. Maybe you want something a little bit darker. We can switch to this Office 2010 black, and you can see it goes a lot darker. We've got a bunch of different options here, so you can kind of play around. There's a nice blue, and we've got kind of a silver there. I'm pretty happy with my green background, so I'm going to go ahead and stick with that, but this is another feature that's available with you, for you. You can also change to Toolbar Mode. So if I click here, you can see it's reduced everything to just a toolbar. A lot of people like this. I believe this is only available in 2018 for your standard view. So if you click modules, you can see that we've got accounts receivable, and here's main. It's got all of my tasks. If I want to change the module, I click here. And now when I click modules, it's got all of my accounts payable modules or tasks. So I'm not a big fan of the toolbar mode. I like to have my full window open here. So I'm going to switch it back to that as we move on. The next topic I want to cover is adding favorites. So down here you'll see you've got your modules, but we also have a tab called favorites. If I pull this up, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger again. If I pull this up, you can see that we already have some favorites in place. You can have a whole module. So if I click on sales order, you can see it takes me directly to the sales order module. If I click a tasks here, this is going to open up sales order entry for me. So it's a nice way to favorite all of your tasks that you use all the time. Another thing that you can do with this, though, is create sort of a process flow through here. So you can see I've got one set up for accounts receivable that kind of goes through the invoicing process and the cash receipts process. To create new shortcuts in your favorites, we can right-click. We've got a few options. You can insert a separator. That's going to create a nice little line there. Keep your different tasks separate. You can insert a new folder. So let's insert our AP folder. And you can also insert a shortcut. This will take you to a file out on your system. So if you have a drawing or some terms and conditions, something that should be connected to this process, you can add that through that shortcut. Otherwise, we can come up here to Accounts Payable, and it's just a drag and a drop. So we're going to bring in Invoice Data Entry, Invoice Register, Daily Transaction Register. And you can see we've created a nice little invoicing process flow for our AP. Favorites are available in both Classic and Standard View, but in Classic View, you also have the option to put shortcuts up along the top. So there's a little bar at the top. You can drag and drop your shortcut in there, and it's right on your top toolbar. This is not available in Standard, unfortunately. Next, I wanted to show you how to change the background color of your company. This can be really useful if you have a test company that you are, you go in, you're doing some test transactions, you're playing around with the functionality of the system, and you want to be sure that you're not actually putting live data into that system by accident. So we're going to come into Library Master, Company Maintenance. I'm going to pull up my Basics company, and we're going to go over here to our Theme tab. You need to make sure that the theme code is Classic, and when you do, that enables this field. So you can enable a company-specific background. You can choose to do the background, the frame, or both. The frame is just going to be this. The background is going to be all of this. We're just going to stick with the background for right now. And now we can choose a color. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this kind of nice pumpkin orange here. You're going to see that this is very, very bright, which is actually okay. So here's our new background color. It is really bright, but this is really nice because it's going to remind you immediately, I'm in my test company, I should not be entering live transactions. So really important. Turning this off is just as easy. And we are going to turn it off because I don't think you guys want to see this orange background through the rest of the presentation. Just come back in here and we can change the background to no, and now everything is going to be in gray again. Another way to customize your views in Sage is using a program called Customizer. The Customizer allows you to modify your screens so you can see exactly the data that you want in the place that you want. And we're going to pull up customer maintenance to take a look at this again. This is advanced functionality, so I'm going to give you a taste of what you can do, but you may want to contact Vrakas if you want to do any advanced customizer work. So what I'm going to do here is right-click on some of this blank space, and it's going to take me to Panel Settings and Customizer. You can also reach this from within Custom Office, but it's a little harder to find the right panel to change. Here, you can select which companies. So if I create a new customized panel, you can select the users and the companies that are available. I only have one user because it's just my test system. And you can select to have all companies and all users. I've already got one set up, so let's go ahead and continue editing this one. Going to drag this down a little bit. So this pulls up the panel to be edited, and you can see all the objects here, and they can be hidden and or moved around. So let's say I don't like that paperless button here. I want it to go up here. Just drag and drop, and it's going to go in the right place. Doesn't really make sense to move it up there, so I'm going to bring it back down here, but you get the idea of how you can move all of your fields. To hide fields, let's look at our credit here. So maybe you guys don't do credit checking and you just want to hide this whole section. If we right click, it's going to take us to this object. And if we go to our Options tab, it gives us the ability to hide. So you can see it's hidden. And we have to do this for every object in this section. So we'll go ahead here. Just get these all hidden. Okay. And so let's take a look at what happened here. Let's go ahead and save this, and we're going to close out again. And when we reopen customer maintenance, you can see that all of those credit limits, they're now hidden. Another thing you can do is change the tab stops related to this task. So if I go ahead and tab through here, you can see it goes to address 1, 2, 3, zip code, and you can tab all the way through. Maybe you never use address 3 and you would like to remove that from your tab stops, or maybe right after you get done with the phone number, you would like it to go to your email address because that's the next thing that you enter. Let's take a look at doing that. So let's go to Panel Settings, Customizer, and again, I'm going to just use the panel that I already have created. And we can right-click on our address 3. If we come over to our options, you can remove it from the tab stop. So I'm going to go ahead and unselect it from the tab stop. For the email address, we're going to come over, there's a button here called Tab Definitions, and there's a lot of buttons here. There's a lot of things you can do within Customizer. So again, just giving you guys a little taste. Let's go into that Tab Definitions, and you can see this is going to allow us to change the tab sequence. So we've got our email address way down here at the bottom. I'm going to use the up and down arrows to move it right after our telephone extension. And we can go ahead and close out of here, save all this, and when we reopen customer maintenance, I'll pull up a customer. If I tab through, you can see it just skipped address 3. And if I go a little bit further, it's taken us directly to our email address. This can be done on almost all screens in the system. Just remember that when you customize, you may have to make adjustments after an upgrade when new fields are added or moved. You also might want to consider not making too many changes. Maybe you know, you've got users who they don't think that they're going to use a field, but you actually want them to review that. Maybe you want them to review the credit limits, and they're not doing that. So it's maybe not a good idea to do this, you know, all over the place, but it's a really cool tool, and it can definitely make your entry, you know, a lot easier. One last thing I want to show you with the customizer is on the detail for data entry. So let's go over to our sales order. And I'm just going to pull up any sales order here and go to our Lines tab. There are a few things that we can do here to change the look. One thing is bringing things up and down from your primary and secondary grid. This is the primary grid, this is the secondary, and maybe the primary grid, I'd like it to have my description. You can drag and drop, and it's going to bring the description up. And maybe I don't actually want the comment, I want the comment to go away. Let's put that guy down here. And you can see the comment is gone from there. Now the description is up there. Another thing you can do is change the panel view. So if you remember, we had that little double arrow back on our History tab. We can also do that here. If I click Change View, it's going to bring that secondary grid right up next to the primary grid. A lot of people use this when there's information in the secondary grid they want to make sure to review, like your account numbers, your warehouses, things like that. So we can switch back and forth with this little button here. You can also add fields from other screens. So let's take a look at that, and we're going to do that through our customizer. So I'm going to right-click, go to Customizer, and we're going to actually create a new custom panel. It looks like I have an old one in there, and we're going to do it for this user and company. This one's a little bit different. You can see it doesn't have all the different objects on the grid, but if you right-click either in the primary or the secondary, you can add fields. And we're going to click this little button here to add our field. And you can see by default, it's bringing up any user-defined fields that I have related to this topic. But that doesn't mean that's the only fields that are available. If you come down here and click Show All, you can see that this has now brought up all the fields on sales order entry, and we can also pull fields from our item code. So maybe for this one, it would be useful to see category 1 and category 2 from our item code. This is going to give your users some more information on their sales order as they're doing entry. So we've added those fields, and now we can close. And when we reopen sales order entry and go over to our Lines tab, you can see it's giving me some information on category 1 and category 2. So it's kind of nice. It's bringing over all of that information. Your users, may need some of that information to help them with the data entry. You can see it's grayed out. That means that that's not something you can change here. It's information only. Next, we're going to move on to ways to look at data to bring data up in your system. Two main tools that I use all the time are Custom Lookups and Business Insights Explorer. Custom Lookups can be found on any magnifying glass screen. So let's start by looking at those. We're going to go back to our trusty customer maintenance. So on this screen, you can see it defaults to this data. We've got a little custom button down here. So we're going to create a new view. I'm going to call it Basics. And you can choose to make this the default view or not make this the default view. I'm going to go ahead. Here, we can add fields to our table. So maybe we want to add address 1 and 2, city and state. But the zip code is way up here, so that's a little bit weird. We kind of want the zip code to go after our state. You can use these up and down buttons to move those fields around. And I'm actually going to move the status field down here too, because I don't really need to see that at the top. I'm going to move the phone number because, again, that really should come after the rest of the address. And we also have sort field in here. I don't really need that field, so I'm going to use this button to remove it. The other thing that I want to list in here is who's the salesperson for this customer. So I can come down here. I could use the salesperson number, but maybe that's not as useful to me as their name. Maybe you really want the salesperson name. If you come down towards the bottom, you'll see we have access to a bunch of other tables that are related to this topic. So if we open up AR salesperson and add the salesperson name, and I'm going to move this right up by the customer name, that's going to add that field from this table into the lookup. On the next screen, we can add some filters here. So I'm going to actually filter by the status. I'm going to say I want the status to be not equal to inactive. So it's only going to show me my active customers. On the final screen, this is where we can change our default lookup. So we can change our default search column from customer number to customer name. Maybe it's a little bit more useful to look by the name than by the customer number. And I also want to change it to contains. If I click finish, you can see these are our results. We've got our salesperson name, we've got all of our address information, and it's only showing us our active customers. One other thing to point out here is the ability to sort any of these columns. So we could sort it alphabetically here or by the salesperson. You're going to find this throughout the system. So find a column, click on it, and see if it sorts. Most of them do. Another thing that you can do here is you can export this to Excel. So if we click this little button right here, it's going to bring this out to Excel. This can be a great way to further kind of play around with your data. Maybe you want to remove some from here or add some information to this. It's really nice to be able to export this. Another feature that's fairly new is the ability to search for empty fields. I'm going to make this smaller. So you can see here in my address too, I've got some empty records. We can change our search to address 2 is empty. And when we do that, it's going to show me only the customers whose address 2 is empty. This could be really useful for kind of fixing your data. Let's say you want to make sure everybody has a zip code, everybody has a salesperson attached to them, or you know, everybody has a telephone number. That's where the is empty is going to come in really handy for you. So that's custom lookups. There's obviously a lot of things that you can do here. And let's take a look at the other tool we've got. So the other tool is Business Insights Explorer. It's most useful when you want to create a list and save that template for future use. It allows you to do more things than the custom lookups, like adding summaries to fields and doing grouping. So you can find these under each module, or under the Business Insights tab, you can find all of them. But let's go ahead, we're going to stick with our customer, and we're going to open up our customer view. And I already created an example. One that I really like here is aging by customer. In this view, it allows me to see the customers, and they're grouped by division. It's giving me all of their balances, and I've got some subtotals. And I also have like a final total for all of it. You can also do filtering. So a lot of people will do filters for like the terms. So maybe you want to only see your credit card terms, and this is the list of people that you charge credit cards for daily. So let's take a look at a couple of the features here. Let's start with filtering. We can switch here just by clicking on the little arrow. So if I click net 30 days, it's narrowed it down. It only brings up net 30 days. To change it back, just click again and change it to all. And you'll notice when I did that filter, it turned the arrow blue. That's a good warning that you've got a filter in there. You can add or remove columns, and we're going to do that by clicking these lines over here. So let's say we maybe didn't want the telephone extension. You just single click, it removes it, and you click again, and it brings it back. There are other ways to add fields, so these are not the only fields available to us, just the most commonly used. We're just doing an overview here. This is a huge, huge program, and there's a lot of things you can do with it. So if you're interested, just give us a call, and we can do a more thorough demonstration of Business Insights. Another way to remove columns here is you single click and just drag it till it says X. Now it's been removed. You can see we've got these subtotals here, and we did this by clicking the sum button. This is for the whole report. It's our summary footer, or you can do it by the group, which we've grouped by our division. Maybe we want to add a second group. All we're going to do is drag and drop this right up here. And now we've got a second group by our salesperson. Kind of nice. Oh, sorry, the subtotals here. Once you click the button, if you right click, it's going to ask you what kind of calculation you want to do. You could do a summary. Maybe you want to do an average for your credit limit. That's how you get those totals in there. So you can save this view for future use, and you can either make it public or private based on your needs. Obviously, public is going to be available to all Sage users. Private is just for you. You can also export from here, so File, Export. And one thing you'll notice when you do export is that it's just going to bring up your data. It's not bringing up any of those subtotals or groups. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. All right, so that is the core of Business Insights. I'm going to click up here to show you what options we have. So these are all of the Business Insights Explorer reports. You can see we've got ones related to your general ledger, to customer. We've got everything from items and sales orders, purchase orders down here. Keep in mind when you're running these that the more detail that is in the table, the longer it might take to run. So if you are doing your item transactions view, it might take a long time to bring up all of your transactions. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about the different kinds of items that we have in the system. So when you're setting up your items, you've got these choices. And I wanted to review these because we really frequently get this question, what's the difference between all of these? Some of the most important factors to consider are where you're using the item, how you set the general ledger account, and what the item is going to be used for. So let's take a minute and describe each of these types of items. First, we've got our inventory item. Inventory items are available, obviously, when you have the inventory module, and they're only used in your sales order and purchase order. So if we pull up an item here, we set our general ledger account by product line, and you can see that right over here. We've got our product line general ledger account set here. They cannot be changed by item. One of the unique features is you can have a vendor that's associated with your inventory item. And really, inventory items are pretty basic. The question to ask is, are you inventorying them? If you are, then you should be using an inventory item. Miscellaneous items don't require you to have the inventory tab, and you can find these up here under common information, miscellaneous item. So you don't have to have inventory, sales order, or purchase order, but you can use them in sales order and purchase order if you so choose. The general ledger account is set by item rather than by product line. And we have a few choices when we're creating these miscellaneous items. We can use a comment, a charge, or a miscellaneous. So a comment is going to do just that. It's going to have a comment, a standard comment that you're going to be able to add to an order or an invoice. You can't add any price or cost, or really there's just not a whole lot you can do. It's just a description. It's just a comment. The next one we have is a charge. So a charge, you can have a price and a cost. This one does not have a cost because we didn't allow its use in purchase order. If I do click that, it does show up. You do not have a quantity. That's the difference between a charge and a miscellaneous item. So it's only a flat rate charge. And you can see here's where we set the general ledger accounts. And the final one, and most commonly used, is a miscellaneous item. Again, you've got your unit price and cost. You can have a quantity associated with it, and we set our general ledger accounts over here. The last type of item is called a special item, and those items are noted with an asterisk. So if I come over here to my Lines tab, you can see I've got one set up here. It is an asterisk for handling charges, and actually I'm going to switch my view because this is one of the places where it'd be really nice to look. You can see it's got a sales account and a cost account associated with it. These special items, they're only made on the fly, so you can only make them in your invoice or order. And you use the same general ledger account for all special items. This is set in the sales order options. It's much harder to view, to make any changes to these, so you can't set a standard price or cost. You can see this has zero cost associated with it. You can't change your cost accounts on here, so it's a lot harder to control these special items. It's also harder to look at your history. The only way that you can see history for these is by looking on your invoice. There's no standard tool to look at the history for your special items. So because of these reasons, we recommend using special items very sparingly. I have personally experienced how easy it is to start using this special item, and then people, learn about it, they start using it, but they don't understand how it works. And so people are using it, things are going to the wrong general ledger accounts, you've got to make adjustments. It can get out of hand pretty quickly. So we recommend setting up a miscellaneous item instead of using the special items. The last section that I wanted to talk about here is something I like to call, who did that? This is ways to look at who's made changes in your system and to audit your data. So sometimes you'll come across something that has been changed and maybe it's come up incorrect. you probably want to know who made the error so you can correct them so they don't make the mistake in the future. So there are a couple of ways to do this in Sage. Let's start again with our trusty customer maintenance. And we're going to pull up a record. And you remember we right-clicked here before to get to our customizer, but we can also look at this system info. System info is going to give us lots of information, but we're going to focus right here on the file information. This tells us when it was created, and by who. This was a default company, so obviously this data is really old, but no big deal. But you can also see who last updated it and when. One of the ways I've known this to be really useful is in sales order. So let's say you've got a sales order that comes in, you've got an order deadline, and your customer service person swears it was in before the deadline. You can go ahead and check the sales order, and you can see exactly what time the order was entered and saved into the system, and by who. So yeah, you can find this throughout the system. It's not just in customer maintenance, it's all over, sales order, vendor, everywhere. Another way is to look at your audit reports. So in accounts receivable, accounts payable, and inventory, you have audit reports under the reports menu. It's going to be for customer, vendor, and item. So if we click here on our customer audit report and we click preview, we can see these are the changes that have been made since the audit report was last purged. So here's the user, here's the date, here's what they did. Maybe they created, maybe they deleted. In this case, these were all changed. And you can see the original value and the new value. So in this case, I changed the word street to ST. In this case, I changed the word, the RD to road. You've changed the salesperson, you've changed the terms or the credit limit. This can be a really great way to track exactly what's been happening in the system, exactly who's been making what changes. So those are the two ways that you can kind of navigate through and find out who's been making changes to your system. So one last note on navigating Sage before I end. Don't forget that you always have access to the help file. So if I open customer maintenance again, we've got our little question mark down here. This is our help file. And if we click on this, it's going to take us to some suggested tasks or just about this window. You can find out what each of the fields are supposed to be, and really you can just learn a lot about the way the system works. So that is what I've got for today. I hope we covered a lot of information, so I hope that something was useful for you and that you enjoyed it. I guess, do we have any questions?
No, we don't, but I do have a question. When someone has customized a screen, how do you know it's been customized?
Good question. So you can tell right up here, you've got a little asterisk. This is going to be a good indicator that a screen has been customized.
Okay. And then my next question is, you showed us the memo in the inventory. What other modules can I find memos in?
Oh, sure. So you can find memos in most places, customer inventory. They can be attached to sales orders or purchase orders or invoices. So you're going to find memos throughout the system.
Great.
Yeah. Any other questions?
And nope, doesn't look like there's anything else out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this is going to conclude our webinar. Thank you for attending. And just one more plug, stay tuned for our June webinar, which is going to cover Sage CRM. We look forward to seeing you, and have a good day.